Yeah, somebody is put a message. Yeah, I've started recording. Okay, so a nation state is something that we need to understand as a modern phenomenon. The state is most certainly a modern institution. You might have gone through books which say state and government in ancient India. A.S. Altekar, uh, one of the uh, most well-known writers, and he makes this cardinal mistake of talking about a state in ancient India. There was no state in ancient India. Okay. And people talk about political thought in ancient India. There was no political thought in ancient India. We didn't have the polis, we didn't have politia. When we do Aristotle, you will understand what politia is. I have done it with the other people, the other group. We didn't have these things in ancient India. So there's no political thought. Uh, and there is no political thought outside of ancient Greece, even in Europe. And there is no political thought anywhere in Europe after the rise of the Roman civilization. And you will find that political and politics and all these words are those which are renewed in the modern period with different meanings, not the meanings that the Greeks gave them, by thinkers starting with Machiavelli. Uh, and the process culminates in John Locke. Okay, so that is basically what you need to keep in mind. So if you look at, I have a book by a famous, uh, what should I say, scholar, okay, Otto Gierke, who talks about, whose book's title is Political Thought in the Middle Ages. And nowhere in the book do you find the word political, except in the title of the book, you don't find the word political. Same thing with a book by Pocock, G.J.A. Pocock. Okay. And Pocock also doesn't use the word political because it just went out of circulation. It wasn't there. And let me tell you this. For example, okay, this is an expression used by uh, by Aristotle. Okay, it's a Greek word. It is to be understood as, it has to be pronounced as Koinonia politike. Koinonia politike. That's how it is supposed to be pronounced. Uh, you have politike here. Okay, Koinonia politike. What does this translate into? In Greek,
In
in Greek, it translates into One of the things that you find uh, as telos in Aristotle, I'll discuss this uh, at length when we talk about Aristotle. Uh, Koinonia politicae basically is a part of the teleology that we find in Aristotle. Okay, but when the Romans translated this into Latin, they didn't have the word politic. Okay, they didn't have politic, polis, politia, from which politicae is drawn. They didn't have it. So, how did they translate this? They translated this as societas civilis. That's what the Romans translated this when they wrote in Latin. Okay, societas civilis. And the English translation of this, which was used extensively for the first time by John Locke, became civil society. Now, civil society again in English, starting with Locke, has undergone various mutations. Okay, I'll just drop a few these things. Civil society in Locke is the propertied class. Okay, they are the propertied class. In Rousseau, they are the bourgeois capitalists, civil society. Okay, they are the bourgeois capitalists, or rather, sorry, the bourgeois, uh, yeah, capitalists is fine. We can look at it that way. The bourgeois capitalists. And if you look at Marx, not Marx, sorry, Hegel, in the case of Hegel, the civil society is the bureaucracy, though that is again the English translation. Hegel himself used corporationen, okay, which gets translated into, got translated rather, into English due to the unavailability. We have the English word corporation, which shares the root with the German corporationen, but the meanings are quite different. So this became the bureaucracy, right? And when it again came to Marx, uh, it is bourgeois society. Okay, he doesn't even say capitalist. He just says the bourgeois society is the uh, civil society. When it comes to Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci basically says uh, a civil society can be even church going people. Okay, church going people. And these people also can be called civil society or communities that are formed around some kind of common activity. Okay, they can be called civil societies. Today, our definition is the government and its institutions are political society, and what is non-governmental but still plays some role rather, I'm sorry, in the uh, process of governance, some role. They have been called civil society groups. So things change their meanings. So, so please remember, the state didn't exist anywhere till the modern period. In the modern period, it came into being with the word estate and ownership. Private property. Okay, so that is the estate. If you look at the history of France, their parliament was originally called the Estates Gen Estat General. It is okay, and later on it became Stat General. Uh, so it is from that, and I think I spoke to you about the four estates, the press being the fourth estate, and it was about the meeting of the, we'll use the English pronunciation, Estates General. So the king, the feudal lords, and the people, they represented the three estates, and the fourth estate became the press or the journalists. And even till today, it gets called uh, the fourth estate, uh, which is no longer um, a meaningful usage, if you ask me. Anyway, so state came from a state, and it was supposed to be minimalistic. It was supposed to be minimalistic in its presence, meaning the state was not to be given too many powers. Okay, so now the state on its own doesn't make sense. You must understand that. Okay, the state on its own, when you're looking at the birth, if you just say the state was born, it makes no sense. You have to look at the birth of nation states. Only then will you make sense of what the state is. Only when you prefix it with the term nation. And what does nation mean? Okay, nation comes from Latin natio, which is a feeling oneness. Let's operate with very basic definitions. Okay, so that's how it is. So a nation is a community of people who believe they are one or have similarities. Okay, I must tell you an instance here. Sorry. In one of my trips to the US, I had another person traveling with me. The two of us, he was on a different program, I was on a different program, but we were going to the same places. So we were traveling together. And we went to Gettysburg, the famous address of Lincoln's, Abraham Lincoln's, where you see where he defined democracy, ironically, in a country that doesn't have it, as the rule of the people, for the people, by the people. Okay. Uh, so that is a place where Gettysburg, it's a small place. Um, and Gettysburg is also famous because of the fact that the Civil War ended there. The Confederates, which were the southern states, which did not want to be uh, a part of the United States of America, were defeated by the Unionists. Okay, they were defeated by the Unionists who wanted the whole thing to be one country. So, one of the reasons is that the Northerners are the Unionists in America, and they are people mainly of English descent. Some of them are also of French descent. Though the Germans are the biggest immigrant community, they went in a little later. But the southern side, if you look at it, if you look at states like Texas, uh, Kansas, Louisiana, New Mexico, if you look at all these states, they were mainly uh, people who spoke Spanish. Okay. They were mainly people who spoke Spanish or people of Spanish origin who today are called Hispanics, 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 and that's not a very uh, respectable term. If somebody is a Hispanic, then that person is looked down on in like being an African American or a Black American. Okay, Hispanic is also looked down on. Anyway, so sorry about that. If you look at this particular idea of nation and, you know, a community of people who are similar, then we are looking at what could be the reasons that brought people together and made them into nation states. Are these voluntary associations? Okay. Oh, I forgot that Gettysburg story. Yeah. So while I was at Gettysburg there, um, this chap uh, was traveling with me. So we both went to a Subway for our breakfast. And that Subway was a franchisee operation. And guess what? Who do I find there? I find an Indian, of all people, running the Subway. Okay. So he asked me, "Where are you from?" And I tell him, "I'm from India." And he said, "No, no, I know you're an Indian, but where are you from in the USA?" He thought I had settled there. I said, "No, I haven't settled here. I'm here visiting as a visiting fellow, and I have come here for a reason, but I'm from Hyderabad." Oh, he got talking, and then he gave me, we had our breakfast as I was leaving. He said, "Here's something for you." And he passed on 2 cookies free of cost. Their cookies are huge, and each one of them costs almost $1. And he gave me two free of cost. And my friend was a little stunned. Okay. He said, "You just got them just like that?" I said, "Yeah. Did you see any other transaction?" He said, "No." And then we ended up at Washington, D.C. Okay. And while we were in Washington, D.C., this guy said, "I feel like having beer." I said, "Okay, let's go and pick up a beer. Let's see if there's a store somewhere near where we were staying." And yeah, about half a kilometer away, there was a liquor store. We went inside, and I saw that these were Sikhs who were running this liquor store. SIKHS, Sikhs. Uh, please don't call them Sardarjis. It's a terrible thing to do. Um, so there were Sikhs, and so I don't know. I just said Sat Sri Akal, which is the Sikh greeting. And that was an elderly gentleman. So I said Sat Sri Akal Paji. He also said Sat Sri Akal. And then they wanted to know what we wanted. So this guy said, buy a 6-pack of beer. So I said, we'd like to have a 6-pack of beer. He said, okay. We bought a 6-pack, and that guy put 2 more bottles of beer and said, "You take these." And I said, "But I haven't paid for this." He said, "No, no, take this, keep it." Okay. And by then, this fellow's jaw had disappeared into the ground. Okay. He just was not used to people giving things freely like this. He says, "What is it with you Indians? Why is he giving you 2 bottles of beer free of cost?" Okay. And that chap there gave you cookies free of cost. What is it with you Indians? It's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing that an Indian shows solidarity with an Indian. And the great thing about that guy in Washington was he realized that I was not from the US. He realized probably the way I spoke or whatever, that I had come from India. He said, "You're visiting, right?" I said, "Yes, I'm visiting. I'm from Hyderabad," but I told him I've been into Punjab many times and I know it very well. So, but he recognized that I was visiting. And so he gave it to me, 2 bottles of beer, free of cost. And this fellow couldn't believe that. Now, that is a feeling of oneness. They identified with me as a fellow Indian, though they'll be American citizens. I'm not an American citizen, but the origins are there. I gave you this example, the story from my life for a reason. Okay, you will shortly know what that reason is, because people have been trying to understand this whole thing about nation. Different kinds of explanations have been given. Okay, if you look at some of the, if you basically look at some of the perceptions, you have among the newer people in the 20th century, somewhere around the 70s, you have this man called Benedict Anderson. I don't know if you've heard of him. Anyone who's heard of him?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Benedict Anderson said nations are imagined communities. Okay, it's a nation is not a real community, right? That's what he says. A nation is not a real community, it's an imagined community. At that particular time, television was also not very powerful. Most certainly, there was no internet, not too many computers. Uh, so he talked about how newspapers and radio, and he did also include television, how they contribute to making people believe that they are one community. So he called them imagined communities, nations, which means they are not real. You're just imagining that you're one nation. Okay, that's what he said. And then you have another person.
Sir, I didn't get this idea of imagination.
You
What does he really
imagine the
mean by it?
imagined community as you imagine that you have shared set of beliefs, shared set of values, and you actually are told through various channels that you are one nation. That's what it is. It is an imagined thing in the sense that on the ground there is no nation.
Okay,
Physically, there is no nation. This community that we think we are one nation is something that is imagined by people at the behest of someone. So he also gives the example of how feelings of nationalism were whipped up by Hitler and Mussolini. Okay? He says the whole Nazi thing started as National Socialism. And what national? German. So he said people whip up a frenzy. And these newspapers and radio, and to a certain extent television, they contribute to this imagination of ours that we are one particular community with a shared set of beliefs and a shared set of practices. Okay, that's what this definition of Benedict Anderson says. Did you get it?
Um, but
There
I'm
are
still thinking,
no,
why
there,
is it to imagine if it is real? We are
mm,
feeling that sense of oneness. So we are a nation
yeah,
state.
but it is based in imagination. See,
Okay.
you can believe that you saw a ghost for a minute. You can believe that you saw a ghost. Did you actually see a ghost, or did you see something and imagine that as a ghost? That is,
Imagine,
so
maybe.
that is what he's basically saying nations are. Okay, that's what he says nations are. I don't agree. I don't agree. That is the biggest nonsensical definition of a nation given by anyone.
Right.
It is a nonsensical definition. That's why I began with that, and I began with my story and immediately told you that. Okay, sitting some, uh, you know, halfway across the world, how did that person and me imagine that we had shared culture?
Right. Because it is evident. So this is not making any sense that it is imagined.
It's a senseless argument.
Right.
It's an absolutely senseless argument. So you have to bin it.
Hmm.
Just bin it. It's a nonsense argument completely, and just don't believe it. It's not true. Then there is this other person who goes by the name of Ernst Ernst Gellner, who says that nations are a modern phenomena and are a result of people being told that they have commonalities. An argument not very dissimilar to the argument that you find in Benedict Anderson. Okay, they are not exactly dissimilar, but this is a slightly better argument. This is a slightly better argument. I would ask you to remember Gellner's argument, because at some point we are going to talk about this. Okay? At some point, we are going to talk about this. So please remember that when he says it's a modern phenomenon, people being told that they have commonalities. This is something that mm, let's reserve our judgment about this for a minute.
Sir, here also the word being told
Yes.
says that it's
No, no,
not
that's why I said
some.
suspend your judgment for a bit.
Okay,
Hold your judgment. Don't judge that immediately,
right.
right? Don't judge that immediately. We'll revisit that. While you can dismiss Benedict Anderson's idea as complete rubbish, you, uh, just don't believe him or don't disbelieve him. Just leave it like that. Okay. Now I've forgotten the first name of this man. Is it William Connor? I don't. William. I think it is William Connor. I definitely know that his name starts with a W, but so just let me write W. Connor. Sorry, this is very bad teaching. Not remembering the first name and writing a W there. William Connor makes an argument about nations, which he says is nation is based in ethno mobilization. I wonder why he used the word ethno instead of ethnic when it is a mobilization. Uh, mobilization of people of one ethnic group. Okay, this is yet another definition: ethno-mobilization of people who belong to one particular ethnic group. Keep this also on. Then this is the one that one has to um, basically, you know, take a little bit more seriously than others. There is this man called Edward, I hope, yeah, Edward Shills. Okay, Edward Shills talks about nations as primordial. Okay, primordial groups based in one ethnic culture, and that they have always existed since time immemorial, if you want to put that. Okay, he says nations are primordial groups. Primordial, you know primordial, right? Primordial and primeval. Both these talk about the beginning of human society. Okay, ancient. So if you say we have primordial loyalties, kinships, for example, are considered to be primordial loyalties. Okay, so they've been there right from the beginning. They are ancient. So Schiltz is also talking about ethnic culture, but he's not using this mobilizational thing that Connor uses. And he says that they have always existed, nations. Okay, this is one argument. And this is a fairly serious argument because he's not saying that anyone is promoting those, is promoting a nationality. Okay, then you have two Germans. I'm clubbing them together because what they have to say is more or less the same, though they are not exactly from the same time. Herder and Otto Bauer. So while we are talking about Otto Bauer, before we start talking about him, I had gone for a guest lecture at the University of Hyderabad, and I was talking about Otto Bauer, and there was one chap who kept looking at me like I'm some kind of a freak. I was saying Otto Bauer is not a fully fledged Marxist, but there are Marxist influences on Otto Bauer and all that. And he kept looking at me like I was a freak of nature. I'm usually used to these kind of things, but even I found it disconcerting. So after the lecture was over and everything was over, he says, can I speak to you for a second? I said, yeah. He said, how can Otto Power be Marxist? Otto Bauer, the mistake I did is I didn't write the spelling on the board. So he took it as Otto Power. He heard it as Otto Power, and he was obviously completely confused about how Otto Power also is Marxist or non Marxist. So that was one of the hilarious things that happened in
Sir,
my
I
life.
thought he asked you something
No,
different and
no. He asked me this
okay.
unfortunate thing. Okay. Um, Herder and Otto Bauer, they take normative claims like primordial groups. Okay, that's a normative claim. And they try to ground it in ontology. I hope you remember ontology. Ontology is the pursuit of being. Okay, so they say that nation is a part of the ontological pursuit. That is a part of the human endeavor. The ontological pursuit is a part of the human endeavor, and normative claims like primordial, ethnic, and cultural, and all these kind of things, they try to bring them together into one ontological exercise. And the person who defied them completely, because these were people who were interested, along with Hegel. Hegel is somebody who was interested in building German nationalism, but you have this madman, Friedrich Nietzsche, okay, or Friedrich Nietzsche, if you want. Uh, he basically denies nationalism or nation as an ontological category. Okay, he says nation is not an ontological category at all. He says ontology is not something that you pursue through nations, because nations for him have order, okay, laws and all that kind of things. So this order, he calls it Apollonian. Apollonian because Apollo is the eldest son of the Greek god Zeus, Zeus, and he believed, Apollo believed in imposing order, okay, on people, an orderly society. So Nietzsche says that this is an artificial order because people don't know why they are here, why they should be what they are. And therefore, he calls the Apollonian order, uh, he says, is a lie perpetuated to build pan Germanism. He calls it pan journalism because it's from the old Prussian Empire. Everything that is a part of old Prussian Empire. So he says that the desire to build a pan Germanism in a false order that doesn't exist is not an ontological exercise. Okay, for him, what is ontological is that which he calls Dionysian. Dionysian is disorder. Dionysius is also the son of Zeus. If Apollo represents order, Dionysius is drunkenness and disorder. And Nietzsche basically argues that it is from the Dionysian disorder that one can find the true ontological meaning of our existence. He says it can't come from a falsely imposed order, right? So, these are all the arguments that have been made. Now, sociologists have tried to identify categories on which you can build nations, nation states. One is race, okay. Two is ethnicity. Three is language. Four is culture. And five is shared social beliefs. If you read T.K. Omen, the sociologist, you'll see these. Now, first let's debunk these. Just let's get rid of them. Are there races? They say Caucasians. Who are the Caucasians? The
White skinned
Europeans.
people.
Hmm? Yes, Prashant?
I mean, white skinned people.
Ah, the Europeans. It's not just skin, it's also the bone structure. They are supposed to be Caucasian and Caucasoid. Then you have the black people, and they are supposed to be Negroid. And then you have a third category, which is Mongoloid, comes from Mongols of Mongolia. And this includes the Chinese, the Southeast Asians, and Filipinos, and it also includes uh, the native Indian tribes of North America, and some people even say South America. But then who are we? Who are we? Seriously, are we Mongoloid? We don't look like them. Are we black Africans? No, so we are not Negroid. We are not Caucasoid because we don't have white skin. We don't have that big bone structure they have. We don't. So, who are we then? So, that whole classification of race is nonsense. There's only one race, human race. That is the latest thing that everybody, including medical professionals And now that we have got to a stage where DNA profiling and all have been done, it has been seen that irrespective of your appearance, irrespective of the color of your skin, and all these things, irrespective of all that, we don't have one race. We don't have one. I mean, we are all just one race. We don't have these different races. Okay. And all human beings have originated in Africa, and they have mated with other human, not Homo sapiens, but other Homo species like Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis, which is Neanderthal man. And so they say there is only one race. There is absolutely only one race, which is Homo sapiens. Okay, ethnicities. What are ethnicities? People say Rajasthan, those colors they wear, the red and yellow, they are ethnic colors. What is ethnic? It comes from ethne, E-T-H-N-E. What is ethne? Again, it's like race. Today, there are no different ethnicities. Hmm? There might have been at one time when, the people who were called American Indians, the aboriginal populations of Australia, the Maoris of New Zealand might have constituted ethnicities. Ethnicities are also sometimes tribal, but that is not the basis for nationalism. Do Maoris have a nation of their own? Do the Aborigines of Australia have a nation of their own? None of these people have their nations. So that is also a nonsensical category. If you say you construct language, rather you construct a nation on the basis of language, that is yet another unsustainable idea. It should be one language, one nation. But how do you explain France and Belgium having two countries speaking one language, which is French? How do you explain Austria and Germany, two nations speaking one language? How do you explain Spain speaking Spanish, Valencian, Basque, Catalan? How do you explain this nation state? How do you explain this? I'm giving you examples from Europe only because these are things that started in Europe, nation states. Okay. Culture. Is culture a basis for, then you should have one nation, one state for one culture. But you have so many different nations for those who are rooted in Christian culture, in Islamic culture. So, what is culture anyway? Culture is what we develop artificially. Okay? When you say somebody is cultured, I always give the example of pearls. You talk about natural pearls and you talk about cultured pearls. Natural pearls are all different shapes, different sizes. But cultured pearls are those which are of the same size, they look the same, so they are artificially created. The more cultured you are, the less natural you are. Okay? That is one thing that you have to remember. But it can be the basis, not on its own, in conjunction with other things. Shared social beliefs. Then the Shias of the world should have one nation. The Sunnis should have one nation. The Roman Catholics should have one nation. They are not there. Okay? So these are all not grounds. And because I have gone into ethnicity, ethnic culture is, I've told you that today people reject the idea of ethnicity. Okay? They reject the idea of ethnicity. Anthropologists, sociologists like Andre Bataille, Virginius Khacha, all these people basically say that there are no ethnicities. There are no different races. So these are not the things. So there is some truth in what Ernst Gellner says. Mobilizing people on the basis of commonalities. So remember, I'm going to stop today because I have to start working on editing my book. Uh, and it's long enough anyway. So what I would ask you is that tomorrow when we meet, we'll have to see Ernst Gellner and Edward Schiltz. Ernest Gellner and Edward Schiltz, not the ethnic culture, but the primordial groups. Primordial groups. That makes sense or can make sense because that includes shared social beliefs, the primordial groups. That and mobilization on the basis of commonalities. Let's see what they too can produce if we put them together. But I won't do that tomorrow, actually. I'm sorry I said that tomorrow. I'll bring Ernst Gellner and Edward Schiltz back after I explain to you the formation of nation states in Europe first and through the rest of the world later, throughout the rest of the world later. Okay, then I shall talk about the different types of nation states, and then we can go back to Gellner, go back to Schiltz. The others you can dismiss. Dismiss them straight away. Straight away, you can dismiss the rest of them. And the biggest nonsense is Anderson. The biggest national, this thing. Okay. And what Connor is doing is creating a redundancy. Ethno mobilization of people of ethnic group. What does that mean? They don't know that they are one ethnic group. If there is an ethnic group, don't they know? They know. So where is the mobilization there? You're going to say something, madam?
Uh, Sir, I was about to ask about Anderson.
Ah,
He might have thought something and have written or expressed his views that nations are imagined communities. What was his perspective? Why did he say that?
his perspective was that nations are artificially created. They are only meant for war and things like that. It is the it's got nothing to do with the feeling of oneness. It is just an imagination that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. So he's anti-nation state. He's anti-nation state. There have been in history a number of people who are anti-nation states. Karl Marx is a striking example. He saw that as a bourgeois process. Okay? So, therefore, I say discount him.
Yes, sir.
If you have something else to say, go ahead.
No, sir.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to say something.
So, sir, by this he meant in a negative sense that they are imagined communities.
Yes, he meant it in a negative sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, if he meant it in a negative way, then what would be the positive one? Did he talk
The
about that?
positive one for him is like the John Lennon song, Imagine.
Mm-hmm.
All the people living as one. Or like Nehru, who talked about the global village,
Right.
right? So that is the kind of thing there.
Okay.
Right. Nehru also believed in a global village. He talked about it extensively. He believed in peace, no war, and he believed in humanity. That's what makes him a great man. That's what makes him a great man. He believed in humanity. He was not cynical about humanity. Benedict Anderson is cynical about humanity. Nehru was not cynical about humanity. He saw the nation state as a stepping stone towards an international order, which he called a global village. All human beings can live as one. Okay, then. So
Yes, sir.
I'll see you tomorrow, same time.
Yes,
And
sir.
please tell everybody that day after tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
Yes, sir. I'll inform.
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir,
Yes, Rakesh, I'll call you and Prashant now in about 10 minutes. Okay?
okay, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.